Give the bonus to Tyler. He needs it more than you do. My father's words hit me like a slap across the face as I stood in my childhood kitchen, the $15,000 check burning in my pocket. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. His expression was dead serious, arms crossed, that familiar look of disappointment already forming before I'd even refused. My name is Vanessa Cole. I'm 29 years old and I just received the biggest achievement bonus of my career as a senior analyst at Blackwood Financial. 3 months of 80-hour weeks, missing my best friend's wedding, and sacrificing every weekend had led to this moment. And now my father wanted me to hand it over to my 32-year-old brother who'd never held a job longer than 8 months. Dad, I earned this, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. He shook his head like I was a child refusing to share toys. Family takes care of family, Vanessa. Tyler's going through a rough patch. You're doing fine. You don't need it as much as he does. The rough patch he mentioned was Tyler's 4th failed business venture. This time a cryptocurrency investment scheme that had predictably collapsed. Before that, it was a food truck, a dropshipping store, and some multi-level marketing nightmare. Each time my parents had bailed him out. Each time I'd watched in silence. I left my parents' house that evening with the check still in my possession, but the guilt sat heavy in my chest. Mom had barely looked at me during dinner, her disappointment radiating across the table like heat from an oven. Tyler hadn't even shown up, which was typical. He only appeared when there was something to gain. As I drove home to my small apartment across town, I replayed the conversation in my head, searching for the moment when I'd become the bad guy. I'd always been the responsible one. While Tyler was partying through college on Mom and Dad's dime, I'd worked 2 jobs to pay my own tuition. When he'd moved back home at 25, I'd already been living independently for 4 years. I'd never asked them for a penny after turning 18, yet somehow I was the selfish one for wanting to keep what I'd earned. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Talk to Tyler. He's really counting on this. Don't let your brother down. I turned my phone face down and kept driving. The streetlights blurred past as anger replaced the guilt. This wasn't about helping family. This was about enabling Tyler's irresponsibility while punishing me for my success. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn their approval, but it was never enough. Monday morning arrived with the usual chaos at Blackwood Financial. I sat at my desk, coffee in hand, staring at the bonus check I'd deposited over the weekend. My colleague and mentor, Patricia Hayes, noticed my distraction immediately. You look like someone kicked your dog, she said, perching on the edge of my desk. Patricia was 51, brilliant, and had climbed her way to senior partner through sheer determination. She'd taken me under her wing when I'd started 5 years ago. I explained the situation with my father and Tyler, watching her expression shift from surprise to frustration. Let me get this straight, she said slowly. You worked yourself half to death on the Morrison account, saved our client millions in bad investments, earned a substantial bonus through your expertise, and your father wants you to give it to your unemployed brother? When she put it like that, the absurdity was almost funny. Family obligation, I muttered. Patricia leaned closer, her voice dropping. Vanessa, I'm going to tell you something I wish someone had told me at your age. Enabling isn't love. And sacrifice isn't nobility when it only goes one direction. Her words settled over me like a blanket. I'd never thought of it that way before. That evening Tyler finally called. Not to thank me or even ask politely, just to confirm when he'd be getting his money. Dad said you're being difficult about this, he started, his tone already defensive. I'm not being difficult. I'm keeping the bonus I earned. There was a pause, then a laugh. Come on, Nessa. You know I'm good for it. This is just temporary. Once my new venture takes off. Your new venture? I interrupted. Tyler, you don't even have a new venture. You have debt from your last 4 failures and a pattern of expecting everyone else to fix your mistakes. His voice turned cold. You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad believe in me. Just because you're bitter doesn't mean you get to sabotage my success. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. My hands were shaking. Jealous? I'd been paying my own rent since 20, building a career, earning respect in my field. Tyler had been coasting on charm and empty promises, burning through my parents' retirement savings. And somehow I was the villain. My phone immediately started buzzing with texts. Mom, please reconsider. Dad, we raced you better than this. Tyler's girlfriend Amber, whom I'd met exactly twice. Tyler really needs this chance. I blocked them all and poured myself a glass of wine. Something had to change. The next morning, Patricia called me into her office. I assumed it was about the Henderson proposal, but her expression told me this was personal. I talked to Marcus last night, she said, referring to her husband who happened to be a family law attorney. He mentioned something interesting about financial coercion. I sat down confused. What do you mean? Patricia explained that what my family was doing, pressuring me to hand over money I'd legally earned, using guilt and emotional manipulation, could actually be considered a form of financial abuse. The term felt too strong, too dramatic. But as she described the pattern of behavior, the constant expectation that I sacrifice while Tyler received, something clicked into place. I'm not saying you need a lawyer, Patricia continued. I'm saying you need to understand that you have the right to say no without being made to feel like a terrible person. Your money is yours. Period. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. That afternoon I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue or defend myself anymore. I was going to show my family exactly where that bonus money had come from and what it really meant. Because they had no idea what I'd actually been working on. The Morrison account wasn't just any client. Morrison Technologies was a major defense contractor, and 3 months ago, they'd nearly made a catastrophic investment decision that would have cost them $40 million. I'd been the one who'd caught it. Buried in hundreds of pages of financial projections was a shell company funneling money into a fraudulent venture. I'd spent weeks tracing the connections, working with forensic accountants, and ultimately saving Morrison from bankruptcy. The $15,000 bonus wasn't just a reward. It was a fraction of what I'd actually earned the company. My base salary was $95,000 a year, respectable but not extraordinary. What my family didn't know was that Morrison CEO Harold Chin. Wait, I needed to avoid that name. What my family didn't know was that Morrison's CEO Harold Patterson had been so impressed with my work that he'd offered me something else entirely. A position as Director of Financial Risk Assessment. Starting salary, $180,000. Plus equity. Plus a signing bonus of $50,000. I hadn't told anyone yet because the offer had only come through last week, and I was still negotiating the terms. But now, sitting in my apartment with my family's angry messages filling my phone, I realized this was the perfect moment to make my move. I called my father back that evening. He answered on the first ring, his tone clipped. Have you come to your senses? I need to talk to the whole family, I said calmly. Can you get everyone together this Saturday? I have something important to discuss about the bonus. I could hear the relief in his voice. He thought I was caving. Of course. We'll have dinner here. Tyler will be so glad you've decided to do the right thing. I didn't correct him. Let him think whatever he wanted. Saturday would be revealing enough. The rest of the week I focused on finalizing my new position at Morrison. Patricia was thrilled, though sad to see me leave Blackwood. You're making the right choice, she assured me. But I'm going to miss having you around. I'll still be in the city, I reminded her. And you're taking me to lunch once a month to make sure Patterson is treating you right. I spent Friday evening preparing for Saturday's dinner. I printed out documents, organized my evidence, and rehearsed what I wanted to say. This wasn't about revenge. This was about setting boundaries and showing my family that their golden child Tyler wasn't the only one with potential. Actually, he had no potential. But I had results. Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather, which felt ironic given what I was about to do. I dressed carefully, professional but not intimidating. I wanted to look like someone who had their life together, not someone trying too hard. My parents' house looked exactly as it always had. Well-maintained, comfortable, the kind of place that appeared in home magazines under classic family living. Tyler's beat-up Honda was already in the driveway. Of course he'd arrived early to make sure he got his money. I walked in carrying a leather portfolio in my purse. Mom greeted me with a tight hug that felt more like relief than affection. I'm so glad you've come around, she whispered. This means so much to your father. Tyler was sprawled on the couch, looking confident and entitled. He'd gained weight since I'd last seen him, his shirt stretched tight across his stomach. Amber sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my arrival. Dad emerged from his study, beaming. There's my girl. I knew you'd make the right choice. We settled around the dining table, Mom serving her famous pot roast. Everyone was relaxed, happy, assuming this was a reconciliation dinner. I let them think that through the appetizers. Then as Mom brought out the main course, I cleared my throat. I want to explain where the bonus money came from. Tyler immediately perked up, probably calculating what he'd spend it on first. Dad nodded encouragingly. I opened my portfolio and pulled out the first document, a detailed breakdown of the Morrison account and my role in it. 3 months ago, Morrison Technologies was about to invest $40 million into what appeared to be a revolutionary new materials processing company. I began. I explained how I'd noticed inconsistencies in the financial reports, how I'd traced the shell companies, how I'd ultimately uncovered a massive fraud scheme that would have bankrupted Morrison. Tyler looked bored. Amber was still on her phone. But my parents were listening, though they clearly didn't understand why this mattered. The bonus was awarded to me because I saved the company from complete financial collapse, I continued. It represents recognition for 3 months of 80-hour work weeks, sacrificing my personal life, and using skills I spent 5 years developing through hard work and dedication. Dad shifted uncomfortably. That's wonderful, sweetheart. We're very proud. But that doesn't change the fact that Tyler needs help right now and family. I'm not finished, I interrupted gently. I pulled out the second document. This is my current salary history at Blackwood Financial. As you can see, I make $95,000 per year. Comfortable, but not excessive for someone with my education and experience in our city. Mom frowned at the papers, clearly confused about where this was going. Tyler sighed dramatically as if I was wasting his time with unnecessary details. I pulled out the third document, the offer letter from Morrison Technologies. This, I said, sliding it across the table, is why the bonus matters. Morrison was so impressed with my work that they offered me a position as their Director of Financial Risk Assessment. The starting salary is $180,000 per year, plus equity in the company, plus a $50,000 signing bonus. The room went completely silent. Dad picked up the letter, reading it carefully. Mom's mouth had fallen open slightly. Even Amber looked up from her phone. Tyler's confident expression had frozen on his face. I haven't told anyone yet because I was still negotiating the terms, I continued. The $15,000 bonus from Blackwood represents the culmination of years of hard work, education, and sacrifice. It's not just money. It's validation that my choices, working through college, building my career, staying focused, were the right ones. I paused, letting that sink in. So when you asked me to give it to Tyler, you weren't just asking me to give him money. You were asking me to hand over the symbol of everything I've achieved to someone who has repeatedly failed because he's never had to face consequences. Dad set the letter down slowly, his face unreadable. Mom was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Tyler's confident expression had completely vanished, replaced by something between anger and humiliation. This is what you wanted to tell us? Dad finally said. That you got a better job? No, I replied calmly. I wanted you to understand what you were really asking me to give up. Every time you've prioritized Tyler's needs over acknowledging my achievements, you've told me that my hard work doesn't matter. That responsibility is for suckers, and failure gets rewarded if you're charming enough. Tyler suddenly found his voice. This is unbelievable. You called us all here just to brag? To rub your success in my face. I called you here to set a boundary, I corrected. The bonus money is mine. The new job is mine. My success is mine. And I'm done feeling guilty for having what I earned while you've been handed everything and squandered it. Amber jumped to Tyler's defense. Tyler's been through a lot. His business failures weren't his fault. The market was bad, his partners screwed him over. For times. I interrupted. 4 separate ventures all failed, all with someone else to blame? At what point does it become a pattern instead of bad luck? Mom finally spoke, her voice small. We never meant to make you feel unappreciated, Vanessa. We just thought. Tyler needs more help. You've always been so capable. So I get punished for being capable? I asked. That's the lesson here? Work hard, succeed, and then subsidize the person who refuses to do either. Dad's face was turning red, always a sign that his temper was rising. You're being incredibly selfish right now. We raised you to care about family, to help when someone is struggling. Tyler is your brother. And I'm your daughter, I replied. But apparently my accomplishments only matter when they can be redistributed to make Tyler's failures less embarrassing. The words hung in the air, harsh and true. Tyler stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. Come on, Amber. But Amber was staring at the offer letter on the table, her expression calculating. She'd been dating Tyler for 2 years, always talking about their future together, about the house they'd buy when his big break came. Now she was seeing hard numbers that proved the big break would never come. Actually, Amber said slowly, maybe we should hear her out. Tyler stared at his girlfriend, betrayed. Are you serious right now? Amber stood up, but she didn't move toward the door. Instead, she turned to Tyler with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Disappointment mixed with resignation. Tyler, I've been supporting us for 2 years while you've been working on your ventures. I've covered rent, groceries, everything. And your parents have been supplementing that. When exactly does your big break happen? Tyler's face went from red to pale. I can't believe you're doing this now. Here. Where else should I do it? Amber asked. We're 30 years old, Tyler. I want a house. I want stability. I want a partner who contributes. Your sister is younger than you and she's making 6 figures. What are you making? The question hung in the air, unanswered because we all knew the answer was nothing. Tyler was making nothing. Contributing nothing. Building nothing. This is perfect, Tyler said bitterly, looking at me. You just had to show off, didn't you? Had to prove you're better than everyone else. No, I said quietly. I just needed to prove I'm not required to be worse than I am to make you feel better about yourself. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough. Vanessa, this attitude is unacceptable. We are a family and family means sacrifice. Your mother and I have always what? I interrupted. Always expected me to sacrifice while Tyler gets to take? Always dismissed my achievements while making excuses for his failures. Mom started crying, which was her usual response to conflict. I felt the familiar guilt rising but pushed it back down. I was done being manipulated by tears. When I graduated college with honors, you threw me a small dinner, I said, my voice steady. When Tyler finally graduated 2 years late after changing majors 3 times, you threw him a huge party and bought him a car. When I got my first job, he said congratulations. When Tyler got his first job, Dad called everyone he knew to brag. When I got promoted to senior analyst last year, you forgot to even acknowledge it. But when Tyler's food truck failed, we had a family emergency meeting to figure out how to help him. The specific examples seemed to hit harder than my general accusations. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Mom's crying intensified. We didn't mean to make you feel that way, Mom managed between sobs. But we're your parents. We love you both equally. Tyler he needs more support. Why? I asked simply. Why does he need more support? Because he's failed more? Because he's less capable? Because he makes worse decisions? And why is the answer to that always taking from me to give to him? No one had an answer to that. Tyler was staring at the floor now, his earlier bravado completely gone. Amber had moved away from him slightly, physically distancing herself. I pulled out another document, this one I'd prepared specifically for this moment. It was a spreadsheet detailing every financial bailout my parents had given Tyler over the past decade. Mom's inheritance from her mother. $30,000 to Tyler's first failed business. Dad's work bonus 3 years ago. $15,000 to cover Tyler's credit card debt. Their vacation fund. $8,000 for Tyler's cryptocurrency losses. The list went on. In total, they'd given Tyler over $100,000 in the past 10 years. This, I said, sliding the spreadsheet across the table, is what you've invested in Tyler's failures. Money you could have saved for retirement. Money you could have used to actually enjoy your lives. Dad picked up the spreadsheet, his face growing more ashen with each line item. How did you? I'm a financial analyst, Dad. I notice patterns. I pay attention. I've been watching this happen for years. But before I continue with what happened next, if you are enjoying this story, please like and share. Mom reached for the spreadsheet, reading it with growing horror. I didn't realize it was so much, she whispered. Because you never wanted to realize it, I said. It's easier to give Tyler another chance to believe this time will be different, than to admit you've been enabling him into incompetence. Tyler suddenly exploded. You self-righteous. You think you're so much better than me? So what, you got a fancy job? That doesn't make you better. You're right, I agreed. The job doesn't make me better. But the fact that I've never asked you for a dime while you've taken over $100,000 from our parents? That makes me different. Amber quietly gathered her purse and jacket. Tyler noticed and grabbed her arm. Where are you going? Home, she said, pulling free. My home. I think I need some time to think about us, Tyler. About whether there even is an us. You're leaving me? No. Because of this. I'm leaving because I just watched your younger sister outline a decade of your failures with receipts, and your response wasn't shame or determination to change. It was anger at her for succeeding. Amber looked at me with something like respect. Congratulations on your new job, Vanessa. You earned it. She walked out, leaving Tyler standing there like he'd been slapped. The front door closed with a gentle click that somehow sounded louder than a slam would have. Dad found his voice again. Look what you've done. Your brother's girlfriend just left him. Are you happy now? I didn't do anything, I replied. Amber made her own choice based on reality instead of potential. That's not my fault. Tyler collapsed back into his chair, his head in his hands. For the first time in my life, I actually felt sorry for him. Not enough to give him my bonus, but enough to recognize that he was a product of our parents' enabling just as much as he was responsible for his own choices. Mom was still holding the spreadsheet, tears running down her face. We just wanted to help. We're parents. That's what we do. Helping would have been teaching Tyler to handle his own problems, I said gently. Helping would have been letting him face consequences when he was 22 instead of bailing him out. You didn't help him, Mom. You handicapped him. The word seemed to physically hurt her, but I continued. And in the process, you taught me that my achievements don't matter unless they benefit Tyler. That I exist to be the responsible one, the capable one, so that he can continue being the irresponsible one. Dad was staring at the spreadsheet now too, his finger tracing down the list. I didn't realize we'd given him so much, he said quietly. We told ourselves it was just temporary, just until he found his footing. He's 32 years old, Dad. When does temporary end? The question sat heavy in the room. Tyler still had his head down, and I couldn't tell if he was crying or just avoiding eye contact. Part of me wanted to soften this blow to make it easier on everyone. But I'd spent my whole life making things easier for my family at my own expense. Not anymore. I want to be clear about something, I said, looking at each of them in turn. I'm not giving Tyler my bonus. I'm not apologizing for my success. And I'm not going to feel guilty about having boundaries. Tyler lifted his head, his eyes red. When he spoke, his voice was different. Smaller, defeated. You're right. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. I said you're right. About all of it. I've been a screw-up. I've been coasting on Mom and Dad bailing me out. And I've been jealous of you for years because everything seems so easy for you. It's not easy, I corrected. I work hard. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. I know. I didn't want to admit that you were succeeding because you earned it and I was failing because I didn't. The admission hung in the air, shocking in its honesty. Mom reached for Tyler's hand, but he pulled away gently. No, Mom. He's right. You guys have been helping me so much that I never learned to help myself. Every time something got hard, I knew you'd catch me. So I never bothered to catch myself. Dad looked like someone had punched him. We were just trying to be good parents. You are good parents, I said. But good parenting doesn't mean protecting us from every consequence. It means teaching us to handle those consequences ourselves. Tyler stood up, this time with more dignity than his earlier storming exit. I need to go. I need to think. And I need to figure out what I'm going to do without Amber or Mom and Dad's money. After Tyler left, the three of us sat in uncomfortable silence. Mom was still crying quietly. Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him, the weight of revelation aging him in real time. What do we do now? Mom finally asked. You stop giving Tyler money, I said bluntly. You stop making excuses for him. You let him fail and figure out how to recover on his own. Because if you don't, he'll be 40 and still asking for bailouts. Dad nodded slowly. And what about us? You and us? I don't know, I admitted. I love you both. But I can't keep being the person who sacrifices everything to make Tyler's failures more comfortable. I need you to see me as something other than Tyler's safety net. Mom reached across the table, taking my hand. We do see you, sweetheart. Or we should have. I'm so sorry we made you feel invisible. I didn't feel invisible, I corrected. I felt like I only mattered when I was being useful to someone else. The honesty in that statement seemed to break something in Mom. She pulled me into a hug, holding tight. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We've been terrible parents to you. Not terrible, I said into her shoulder. Just unfair. When she released me, Dad was wiping his eyes. I'd never seen my father cry before. Over the next month, everything changed. Tyler got a job as a warehouse manager. Nothing glamorous, but honest work with a steady paycheck. He stopped calling our parents asking for money. Amber reached out to me for coffee, explaining that she'd broken up with Tyler but wanted to thank me for the wake-up call she'd needed. I was heading down the same path as your parents, she admitted. Always believing his next idea would work, always covering his share of rent. You did me a favor even if it didn't feel like it at the time. My parents invited me to dinner several times and each time felt different. They asked about my work, actually listening to the details instead of just waiting to talk about Tyler. When I officially started at Morrison Technologies, they threw me a small celebration. Nothing elaborate but genuine. The director position was everything I'd hoped for. The work was challenging, the team respected me, and Patterson turned out to be an excellent mentor. My $180,000 salary felt surreal every time I looked at my bank account. I bought myself a new car. A reliable Honda that was practical but still nicer than anything I'd owned before. I upgraded my apartment to a one-bedroom in a better neighborhood. Small luxuries that I'd always denied myself while watching Tyler squander money felt like tiny victories. 3 months into my new job, Tyler asked me to lunch. I almost said no, worried it would be another request for money disguised as sibling bonding. But something in his text felt different, so I agreed. We met at a small cafe downtown. Tyler looked different. Thinner, his clothes less expensive but actually fitting properly. He'd gotten a haircut that made him look more professional. Thanks for meeting me, he started, fidgeting with his coffee cup. I wasn't sure you would. What did you want to talk about? I asked, keeping my guard up. He took a deep breath. I wanted to apologize. For everything. For expecting you to bail me out. For being jealous of your success. For letting Mom and Dad treat you like your only value was being the responsible one. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motive. But he seemed sincere. Okay, I said carefully. The warehouse job has been good for me, he continued. It's humbling, you know. Showing up every day, taking orders from a manager 10 years younger than me. But it's teaching me things I should have learned a decade ago. Like what? Like showing up matters. Like consistency matters more than big ideas. Like you can't charm your way through everything. We talked for over an hour, and for the first time in years, it felt like I was talking to my brother instead of a stranger who shared my DNA. He told me about his plan to take online business courses, to learn the fundamentals he'd always skipped over in his rush to be an entrepreneur. I'm not asking for anything, Tyler said as we were leaving. I just wanted you to know that I heard you that night at dinner. And you were right about everything. That conversation didn't fix our relationship overnight, but it was a start. Over the following months, Tyler kept the warehouse job. He moved out of the apartment he'd shared with Amber into a smaller place he could afford on his own. He stopped making grand claims about his next venture and started talking about concrete goals. Paying off his credit card debt, building an emergency fund, maybe taking a management course at the community college. Mom told me she hardly recognized him and she meant it as a compliment. Dad admitted to me during one dinner that cutting Tyler off financially had been the hardest thing he'd ever done, but watching Tyler actually grow up was worth it. I realize now that we were hurting him by helping him, Dad said. And we were hurting you by expecting you to compensate for our mistakes. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. A year after that confrontational family dinner, I was promoted again at Morrison Technologies, this time to Vice President of Risk Management. My salary jumped to $240,000, and I received equity that would vest over 4 years. I'd found a balance between work and life that had eluded me at Blackwood. Patricia and I still met monthly for lunch, and she loved hearing updates about my family dynamics. You did something most people can't do, she told me over coffee one afternoon. You set boundaries and held them even when it was painful. That takes real strength. It didn't feel like strength at the time, I admitted. It felt like being selfish. That's because we're conditioned to think boundaries are selfish, Patricia replied. Especially women. We're supposed to sacrifice, accommodate, bend until we break. You refused to break. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something healthier. They'd started traveling. Small trips at first, then a 2-week cruise they'd been talking about for decades but always postponed to help Tyler. They seemed happier, lighter, like a burden had been lifted. Tyler was seeing someone new, a woman named Claire who worked as a teacher and had zero tolerance for his old excuses. When he introduced us at a family dinner, I liked her immediately. She was kind but firm, the perfect balance for someone still learning responsibility. I bought a house, a small 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with good schools, even though I wasn't planning on kids anytime soon. It was the first time I'd owned property, and signing those papers felt like a declaration of independence. My parents came to the housewarming party, as did Tyler and Claire. Even Amber showed up with her new boyfriend, a quiet accountant who seemed perfect for her. We stood in my backyard, paper plates of barbecue in hand, and for the first time in my life I felt like I belonged in my own family. Not as the responsible one or the successful one or the one who was supposed to compensate for Tyler's failures. Just as Vanessa. "This is really nice," Tyler said, looking around at the house. "You've done well for yourself." "Thanks," I replied, and I meant it. There was no sarcasm, no edge. Just genuine appreciation for his acknowledgement. Dad pulled me aside at one point, his eyes a bit misty. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Not just for the house or the job. I'm proud of the person you are. The person you've always been, even when I couldn't see it clearly." Those words meant more than any amount of money. More than any promotion or bonus or achievement. Because they meant he finally saw me. 2 years after that dinner where everything changed, I stood in the conference room at Morrison Technologies, presenting our annual risk assessment to the board of directors. I was confident, prepared, and absolutely in my element. The bonus check that had started everything sat framed in my home office. Not because of the amount but because of what it represented. The moment I'd finally chosen myself. Tyler had been promoted to assistant warehouse manager and was taking night classes in supply chain management. He'd paid off his credit card debt and was saving for a down payment on a modest condo. Mom and Dad had downsized to a smaller house and were planning a trip to Italy they'd dreamed about for 30 years. As for me, I'd learned something crucial that night in my parents' kitchen. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Helping family doesn't mean destroying yourself in the process. And success isn't something to apologize for or diminish to make others comfortable. The $15,000 bonus had been my line in the sand. But what I'd gained from holding that line was worth far more than money. I'd gained respect from my family, yes, but more importantly from myself. And no one could ever ask me to hand that over.